She doesn't have it.
So range of movement and all that.
My battery's at 17%.
All right, everyone. Welcome to the 2022 NWBA Annual Assembly. Just as a quick reminder, if you have yet to do so, please grab your ballot for this evening's votes and election. Brandon, what's the echo going on with this now? Our agenda for this evening is on the screen. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us here in the room and for everyone joining online. And I'd like to thank the board of directors for all the work that they've put into a fabulous event. Just going to work on that echo real quick. We're going to get the meeting started with an update on nationals. And then we're going to go into a financial update from Mike Godsey, our treasurer. Janie Chaluti is joining us for an update on NWBA eligibility and classification. We will then go into election. We'll talk about the state of the NWBA with our outbound president, Tim Fox, and we'll end with a management report from myself. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Brandon McBain.
Good evening. Good evening. There we go. Yeah, it was on. Good evening. Oh, third time's the charm. There we go. Welcome. So I have a pleasure of giving you guys an update on our Toyota National Championship Series. So first and foremost, we'd like to congratulate the University of Alabama women on their national championship a couple of weeks ago. They won on a buzzer beater from Tokyo bronze medalist Lindsay Zerberg, if you saw it, topping the Fighting Illini 50-48. And congrats to the UTA Moving Mavs on their 67-56 victory over the Crimson Tide men. Next this weekend, so we have a first culmination of our adult and juniors back to what it was pre-COVID. So excited to see the number of athletes on this page and number of games and all the action we have upcoming this weekend. So today kicked off the tournament play with some March Madness when all number 1 seeds in the adult division lost today to either an 8 seed or a 9 seed. So pretty awesome competition to see. So, you know, we'll see if any of those Cinderella stories continue for some of those teams. Also going on this weekend, we have a number of special events. For those of you who haven't been over to the facility yet, over at Wichita Hoops, we're going to be hosting a variety of special events this weekend. One of them is the 2022 NWBA 3-point shooting contest presented by Dr. Dish, one of our new partners this fall. They're here on site. They're the exclusive shooting machine of the NWBA, and you're free to participate. There's over $2,000 worth of prizes. Pretty awesome. You can stop by their booth to qualify. And then also going on Saturday for the juniors is a girls showcase game and the senior boys showcase game, both over at Wichita Hoops on court 5 and 6 at noon on Saturday. Also going on this weekend, we have some other special events happening here at the hotel. First, on Friday, we have the return of the Hall of Fame Banquet. Excited to have that. They've been doing an amazing job, the Hall of Fame committee led by new chair Dave Kiley, and they'll be kicking that off on Friday. So everyone's encouraged to attend. Cocktail mixer and appetizers will start about 6, and the program will go 7 to 9 o'clock. And then also going on in this room will be the junior banquet and that'll be happening on Saturday. And make sure to come by and see all the great prize or awards that are honoring our junior division, and they'll have a dance following that. Both of those banquets will be also available to be viewed via live stream. And then last but not least, these events take a lot of big lift, and we have a lot of amazing support from our host LOCs. And today, we had the UTA Moving Mavs program that hosted the Intercollegiate Nationals. And here in Wichita, we're fortunate to have a great convention and visitors bureau in Visit Wichita that supports this event. So just want to give a round of applause real quick to those great hosts for those events so far in our national championship series. And last but definitely not least, we have coming up in a few weeks at the University of Akron, our women's national championships. This was a site for the Buckeye Classic or Buckeye Cup a few years ago. So it's hosted wheelchair basketball events. They've been a great site for us in the past with tournaments, and we're looking forward to bringing in teams to host that over the course of a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday competition. So be on the lookout for more information on that, and we look forward to hosting those teams as well. And now I have the pleasure of passing it off to our treasurer, Mike Gotze, to update you all on the financials of the organization.
Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well. And so I'm a numbers guy, so I'm going to talk about numbers. If you look on the screen, red is bad in the accounting world, right? You don't want to be in red. For 2017, 2018, and actually for like 6 years prior to that, we were in the red. Red's bad. 2019, we had a really good year and had a lot of momentum, made $145,000, which was making up for the hole that we had been digging for a number of years prior to that. And then COVID hit. COVID, we did all kinds of creative ways of managing our organization in a way to create the most flexibility for our membership. We wanted the people that could play to be able to play. Those that couldn't play, that they were going to be welcomed back with open arms whenever they were ready to play. That created the little note there. It says that there was a massive decrease in Usopc funding of $281,000 in 2020. That is 100% related to our inability to have high performance events during that year. That's the way Usopc funding works. They give it to us. We have to spend it on very specific things. If we don't, it rolls forward to the next year, but we don't get to spend it on other things. There also came, COVID created a membership revenue shortfall decrease of $120,000. That is evident when you go from 2019 to 2020, going from just over $1 million to $635,000. 2021, we've mostly rebounded from those different things. It's important to realize, though, membership revenue, corporate revenue, mostly rebounding, but as we are experiencing in our everyday lives, the expenses have grown, right? We're experiencing that in everything that we do. A dollar that you spent 3 years ago doesn't get you the same thing this year. If you don't believe me, go fill up your car with gas. Included in revenue in 2020 is $45,000 of PPP loans. So that was another one of the creative ways that we were trying to get through the pandemic. And there was $39,000 in 2020. Both of these have been forgiven. And as best we know, they're not going to repeat in 2022. Next slide. We continue to have a culture of oversight and accountability. That includes a bookkeeping company, which is used by most high-performance NGBs. It's USOPC funded currently, at least probably 80 to 90% of it. We still utilize Bill.com and Gusto for payroll to provide separation of controls, efficient processing, and accountability. Those are all important things because when I give you numbers about how our organization's doing, I want them to be right. I want us to be able to, as a board, we can't really manage what we're going to do unless we know that the numbers that we're relying on are correct. Part of that is being audited on as all NGBs are, on an annual basis. And what you have there is, in 2018, we didn't actually finish that process being audited by our outside source until November 15th, 2019. And that's only because that's the last possible day that we could have had it done legally. 2019, we improved that to the end of March. 2020, we were just super aggressive, finished by the end of February. And our auditors still didn't file our tax returns until May 15th, because that's the deadline. And our auditors wanted to procrastinate. This year, the documentation that they give us back when they're done with their field work, that was on March 28th. And that was generated by us. We wanted it to be on March 28th because the individual that's been auditing our organization for the last couple of years, her name's Deja. She understands our business. And rather than train a new person at that external audit company, we opted to go with a schedule that was conducive to her schedule, with one caveat. We wanted to be able to talk affirmatively about how our year was in this meeting. This meeting is pretty much what we guided on. As soon as we set nationals, that's when we're going to have the numbers ready to talk to you all. Next slide. The budget process. So the return, so this is us pretty much planning for 2022. The plan is that we're going to return to individual and team membership amounts consistent with 2019 pre-COVID numbers. Why that's important is that's a measuring tool, right? That's what we want to get back to, and then from there start to grow. And understanding again that revenue still doesn't buy us as much as what it did in 2019. An increase in net income, that's a goal, an increase in net income of $75,000. If you remember, in 2019, we made $145,000. And that's the reality of expenses are going to be higher if we're able to maintain those 2019 revenues. In 2020, we didn't have to borrow into our working capital line. That's something that we started doing in 2018 to literally get through those 7-8 years of losing a lot of money every single year. So we created a line of credit for $150,000. We left that in place to create flexibility. I'm a eat what you kill sort of thing, right? I run a program in Charlotte. You have to raise the money if you want to spend the money, right? And we're not a government. We are the federal government. We can't spend money that doesn't exist. And it's how we have to run our business, because it's how you have to run your family, right? You can't, I mean, I guess some credit places allow you to do it, to borrow money that you can't pay for, but that's just not sustainable. And on my watch, we're not going to do that. We have to be sustainable, because that creates accountability to our membership. I'm very passionate about our organization being around for a long time, and we have to be financially healthy in order to do that. So we did borrow $100,000 in last July, and there's a great reason for that. Number one, it 100% related to the money that we lost in 2020. The USOPC had funded us during 2020. When COVID hit, they continued to fund us as if it was miraculously going to go away. We knew all along, even though we had that cash in our account, we weren't going to be able to spend it on other things, because we would have to return it to them if we weren't able to spend it. How it worked with the USOPC, we didn't spend it at the end of the year, and it was rolled into the next year with basically the same budget from the previous year. So we have the same accountability, we're just not getting new cash. So by the time we go through our preparation for getting ready for Tokyo, we high performance members that are in here, you know that there was a lot of time from April to June, August time period of literally half of every month that you guys were together in camps. There's a lot of money being spent. And one of the things that we also agreed to is that cash flow was not going to be an issue on why we didn't meet our USOPC obligations. So we borrowed $100,000. We still have that borrowed right now, and that's from a flexibility perspective. I'm big on paying our bills on time. It's just something that builds relationships, and that's to our internal people. If you have my information's on the website. If you are ever owed money by the NWBA and you filled out the paperwork, please send me information if you don't think you've been paid on a timely basis, and I'll make sure that gets corrected. A new thing this year, peer-to-peer fundraising model. We've done that for the last 2 years. It's a way for local programs to generate money in a network that, circles of influences that maybe you haven't been able to before. That is done in a way that is super easy for you, right? Literally, you could spend about 5 minutes, take a picture or two, and then just start sharing it on your social media, LinkedIn, text, emails, whatever you're most comfortable with, and it generates things. One of the things we've allowed or created the vehicle for this year is for stock donations. You may not be aware of it, but if an individual owns 1 share of Tesla stock and it's worth $1,000 and they want to donate it, that's different than if they have $1,000 in their checking account and they want to donate it. Because $1,000 that's in their checking account, they've paid taxes on in some form or fashion. But that $1,000, they might have bought the Tesla stock for $100. And for them to sell that Tesla stock, they'd have to pay taxes on the $900 gain. And then they'd be left with maybe $700 that they could pay you as a charitable donation. The way a stock donation works is that money would come in, they would get a $1,000 charitable donation, we would get $1,000 of Tesla stock in that example, and we have the ability to, for example, if the Hall of Fame committee was raising it, Hall of Fame committee may decide we want to leave that money invested. If the Charlotte program was raising money, I want that cash, right? I want it right now, as soon as you can get it. We would sell that stock, and that money would come to the funding source. So that's just another way to create, again, in the nonprofit world, if somebody wants to give you money, you want to make it easy for them to do that. You want it to be a pleasurable experience. And then just even this morning, we were talking in our board meeting, and we had another one yesterday. We've created a revenue and grant writing task force. We need new funding sources, right? We want to do better tomorrow than we did today. We want to do better next year than we did this year. And in order to do that, we need more funding. And we need funding from different sources that we don't currently have. So we got a lot of smart people up here, energetic people. Those 2 task force are going to we're going to entertain bringing in people from outside the board of directors. If you have a source, a need, an interest of revenue, fundraising, or grant writing that you'd like to share, send us an email. Send it to me. I'm on the board of directors page. There's an email there, and I'll get you situated on the correct task force. And I believe that is all. Next up, we've got Janie, the classifier extraordinaire.
Thank you. I want to thank Will, Brandon, and the board for being proactive and looking at the changes in classification over the last 2 years and what's happening. So in our guidelines, the NWBA follows the Iwbf classification, not just the 1 through 4.5, but also the process. And as we know, IPC required IWF to make significant changes to the classification process. So last year, we formed an ad hoc committee to look at what is the NWBA going to do in response to the IWBF changes. So we have a list of the folks that were on the committee. What we tried to do is get somebody from every division, from high performance and from the classifiers, so that we could get a perspective from all the shareholders in what classification is going to work for us, and not just look at what works internationally. So what the committee did was we met in 2021 in looking at the changes. IWBF was told they had to make the changes. We all know they were significant. We all know there were people that were deemed ineligible. And what are we going to do in response? Well, IWBF did not publish what their changes were going to be. So the recommendation to the board, and that the board approved, was that we allow the people that were deemed ineligible to continue to play and wait till IWBF publishes its minimal impairment criteria. So that was published in August. So the committee got together again August through October in order to go through what the minimal criteria was, what the changes were, to go back to the people within their divisions or high performance or the classifiers to get opinions and feedback on what the NWBA wanted to do. So we took that, we went to the board, and the board approved the recommendations. So kind of want to explain what the IWBF does and kind of explain what the NWBA does, because it's a big difference. So the IWBF changes is not changing the 1 through 4.5. That's staying. But what they're changing is the minimal impairment criteria, which we know better as minimal disability. So what we needed to do is all athletes in IWBF, current and new, are going to go through a medical evaluation. And I know we've worked very hard to get rid of that word, but IPC is requiring medical assessments. So you have to have an eligible impairment. These are the impairments that IWBF follows. So impaired motor power, which is paralysis, contractures, limb deficiency or loss, which is your amputees, leg length differences, hypertonia, which is spasticity, ataxia, which is incoordination, and athetosis, which is uncoordinated movements. Then they also have ineligible criteria: pain, cardiovascular, respiratory, joint instability, which is the ligamentous, the ACL tears, the ankle sprains, low muscle tone, and hypermobility. So the NWBA follows all of these. This is what we have been doing. The other thing that's now different is the classification process in IWBF is 3 different stages. So stage 1 is a paperwork kind of process. Every athlete has to send in documentation of what their health condition is. So this isn't just a note from your doctor saying, you know, Joe had a spinal cord injury. They actually want hospital records. They want documentation, tests, things like that that support what your health condition is, what your disability is. And then the next part is actual evaluation, and the third part is observation. So in that stage 1, it's all paperwork. And it's you, the athlete, has to go to the doctor, go to the hospital, get your documentation. It gets sent in to IWBF. It gets evaluated by an eligibility panel. And if there's not enough information, you're going to be deemed non-eligible. And then you have the opportunity to appeal that by providing more information, and you only get 1 chance to appeal it. If you have all the information and your health condition leads to the minimal impairment, and that minimal impairment meets their criteria, then you're deemed eligible. At that point, you're able to play. So in the NWBA, we do have your eligibility built into your registration. So there's that consideration for eligibility component, which you only need to do once. And it's if you have a non-obvious disability, or if you are a 4.0 or a 4.5, you have to apply. Players can play until their eligibility is confirmed. If they are deemed not eligible, those games need to be forfeited, but they can play until eligibility is confirmed. If the committee doesn't have enough information, we can keep going back to the player and ask for more information. If you're deemed ineligible, you have 1 opportunity to appeal that, but there's not a time frame. So if you're deemed ineligible this year, you have until whenever to reapply. In IWBF, you have 3 months. So if you're deemed eligible in IWBF now, you're able to go to a tournament. There's going to be medical classifiers there, PT, OT, or an MD, and they're going to look at, well, this is the impairment that you submitted. So if you submitted you have a spinal cord injury and you have impaired motor power, It's tents set up, little cubicle kind of private tents. You're going to go in, there's a mat, there's 2 classifiers there, and you're going to have to do muscle testing, or you're going to have to do goniometer testing, or leg length testing, or whichever test is determined for that impairment. So you are going to be medically tested in the IWBF system. If what they see in that session does not support what you send in your paperwork, you are deemed ineligible. And you have 1 opportunity to protest that. If you're deemed eligible, then you go to a functional assessment where they look to make sure that they do, back in the day, we did those simulated drills. You hold the ball in front, you hold the ball overhead, you tilt side to side, you pick the ball up. That's another part of it. And then they determine what your class is that you can go forward to what a proposed class would be. So we don't do that. We got rid of that. We got rid of the medical system. So our classifiers do not need to be a PT, an OT, or an MD. They just need to be someone that's interested, that can tolerate sitting in a gym from 8 in the morning to 8 at night. But we can do off court. If you've been playing and they really can't figure out if you're a 2 or a 2-5, they can bring you off to the side court after a game and ask you to try and go through some of those drills. But that is a supplement. That is to help support what they're watching on the court. It is not a substitute for a classification, and it is not done before you go on the court. Intentional misrepresentation. This is cheating. This is you trying to fake it. Previously, this is still in the NWBA. If we find that you are intentionally trying to fake it to get a better classification, then that's, that would go to the ethics committee. IWBF now extends that to coaches, coaching staff, or anyone. So if a coach is teaching a player how not to go to the side when the classifiers are watching them, that's an ethics violation for the coach as well. So sports class and sports class status. So it's a new term, sports class status, for IWBF, for NWBA, but it's something that IPC really enjoys. So your sports class is your 1 to your 4.5, and that stays the same. Your sports class status is where you are in the classification process, and that does change as you go through the process, and that also enables other people to kind of know where you are at in the process of classification. So IWBF has a bunch. So you have your new, not eligible, classification not completed. So that would be, you were observing them, they didn't get enough observation time, so they actually get a different sports class status. Observation and competition, that means they went through stage 1, stage 2, but you still need to see them during competition. A new player, confirmed player, player under review. The next 2 are only transitional because IWBF is going through a transition, so their new sports class status, and anyone that is deemed ineligible who already had a card will remain eligible until December 31st, 2022, which means they'll be able to get through the world competitions. And review with a fixed date, that's for someone who has a progressive disability. So when they're first seen, if the classifiers know they have a progressive disability, they can actually put that as their sports class status as a trigger that they can be looked at in another 2 years. They don't have to ask for a review. It's just going to be generated that the classifiers can look at them. So in the NWBA, it's a little simpler. We have proposed. That's what your team reviewer is going to do. We have approved. That's when 2 team reviewers sign off that that proposed classification is accurate. We have confirmed. That's what the classifiers do. We have AB, which is your able-bodied, which can play in the college and the women's division and the military division. And we have review requested. So observation, this is what we're used to. This is what our our current system is. There's classifiers and they observe you. The changes in IWBF is you need to have 2 international classifiers per panel, which means you can have one that's a zonal classifier. The first appearance, which is the first time a new player is playing, needs to be in the preliminary games before the playoffs. If the player has not been seen before the playoffs, they cannot finish the tournament. And they will get a classification not confirmed, and they cannot be seen until the next tournament. And your sports class status is effective following a game, not a tournament, which is different than what we do, because we don't change your class or your status until after a tournament, so we don't interfere with lineups. We don't interfere with strategies for the coaches until after a tournament. So for the NWBA, we have a minimum of 2 classifiers will observe the athlete during competition. I prefer 3. Still working on that most of the time. If the panel doesn't get, if the player doesn't get sufficient time, they don't change. They still stay as that approved status. And this, again, it will not change until after a tournament, so that it's not going to interfere with gameplay. It's not going to interfere with your lineups. It's not going to interfere with your points. So protests and appeals, IWBF changed this as well. There's different processes to do, and there's different criteria to be met when you can actually protest your classification versus protesting the process that the classification was done in. And you can only ask for that to be done one time, and they have a deadline. For instance, if you're in a tournament and they change your classification after a game, if you want to protest that, you have 1 hour after that decision in order to request the protest. So it depends, different timing, different situations for when you can request a protest or an appeal. In the NWBA, we really feel every player has the right to ask for a review. If you're not comfortable with what your classification is, then you can ask for it to be reviewed and you can ask for questions. But it can only be done one time. In the IWBF, another team cannot protest a player. Only the player can make that protest. In the NWBA, if you see something that you truly feel is not right and that classification isn't right for somebody else, you're able to protest them. So we try to make it easier for everyone to feel more comfortable with the system, and there's not a time frame. So if you're classified as a 2-0 and you really think you're a 1-5, it can be whenever from now that you actually decide to make an appeal. We don't have any deadlines. We just have that you can only do it one time. So the committee recommendations are to follow the 2014 IWBF recommendation, IWBF policies and guidelines, which is what we had been doing. That the high performance and developmental programs have to follow the new IWBF criteria. And in order to go to and get into the pipeline and developmental programs, you have to meet IWBF criteria. Any player that is a current NWBA player that IWBF deems is now eligible can remain eligible in the NWBA. Any player that is not, and this is kind of like that grandfather clause, and that player cannot be protested. So if you have a player that was deemed not eligible by IWBF, they're still playing in the NWBA, another team can't protest their eligibility. They're allowed to play, and just leave them alone. Any player that does not currently play in the NWBA, that IWBF is determined to be ineligible, must apply for eligibility if they want to play in the NWBA. An IWBF card, a Europe card, a national card from another team is not going to carry over. You have to apply for eligibility. And the recommendation remains that all players that are a 4.0 or a 4.5 have to apply for eligibility. So the rationale is this puts us in alignment with IWBF and IPC for our high performance program, but not for our domestic program. And our domestic program does not need to be the same as high performance because we have different goals domestically than we do for high performance. And it's a financial burden, and then for a player, if they want to play, and I need to tell them they have to go and get a therapy session, which probably isn't going to be covered by insurance, just to get some muscle testing so they can play. The other thing is there's a limited number of classifiers that are medically trained because we don't need to be medically trained. So then that poses another additional burden on the system to try and get everybody to get all those medical tests done before they can play. The whole goal and the mission of the NWBA is to be inclusive, and the IWBF criteria is very exclusive. So it really goes against what our mission is. And we wanted to get this done in time and be proactive so people know what their status is going into the next season. Any questions? Anybody else with questions?
But does this mean that with the IWBF, that any classifier has to be PTOT or MD, and that excludes players from being classifiers?
No, but that means there needs, in the medical evaluation component, it is 2 medical classifiers that do that assessment. So if you are a non-medical classifier in IWBF, you may be on a panel, but 2 medical classifiers are going to do that. So in the European, Africa, and the U23 we just had, there were some people that came in, medical classifiers, before the tournament started and assisted with the medical, and then they left so that we could have some people that were non-medical on the panels observing. Any other questions? All right, so if you have questions, you can ask, and I'm going to pass it to Ryan.
All right, thank you, Jeannie. So I'm going to go over the elections. Here's a quick timeline. I'm not going to go through this whole timeline with you. I'm just going to acknowledge the final piece, which is March 31st, which is the end of our timeline for the election process. So by now you have already received your SurveyMonkey link and password to your ballot. For those delegates in attendance, you have a ballot in front of you. Couple of election reminders really quick. The NWBA Board of Directors has 1 position available for election at the 2022 NWBA Annual Assembly. Please vote yes for only 1 candidate listed. Ballots received with more than 1 vote will be invalid and not counted. The 1 candidate with the highest vote total will be elected to a 4-year term with the NWBA Board of Directors. Each candidate's resume can be reviewed by visiting the link below. Click on Board of Directors Elections tab. So at this time, we're going to give you 15 minutes to go ahead and complete that process. I'm going to continue to read, but we will be closing this once again in 15 minutes.
Apologies, there's one error on the on what Ryan just read. Since Tim has resigned his position, there's 1 remaining year for his original term. So the candidate who is elected by all of you will complete the remaining 1 year of Tim's 4-year term, which means that we will then go into a 4-year term election next year. So apologies for any confusion.
All right, nominees in alphabetical order by first name for NWBA Board of Directors are below. Vote yes or no for each candidate.
I guess I should have got my ballots before I came up here.
Just a quick refresher on NWBA bylaw amendment proposal voting information, voting reminders for paper ballots. To process your vote for the NWBA bylaw amendment proposals, please place a large X clearly in either the yes or no box for each proposal. The NWBA bylaws may be amended for a 2/3 majority of the voting membership. NWBA bylaws, Article 10, Section 3. The full proposal form that was submitted for each of the proposal article section names listed below can be reviewed by visiting the following link below. Proposals are listed below in no particular order. Once again, another link to visit if you want to check that out really quick. Voting reminders for online, link to electronic voting for virtual participation can be found in GoToMeeting chat box.
So when they click on that, though, they don't have to put a.
NWBA bylaw amendment proposal, vote yes or no for each proposal. Amendments put forth by membership, proposals 1 through 5. USOPC compliance and audit required actions are proposals 6 through 12. Legal consultant recommendations, proposals 13 through 22. And staff recommendations for consistency, clarity, and formatting, proposals 23 through 30. So once again, we're going to give you 15 minutes to complete that. So that'll put us right at 9:15. I'm going to pass it over to Tim Fox now. Yeah.
That's correct. There's 14. Yep. Thanks, Chris. The question in the room was that the link only goes up to 14 amendments, and wanted to clarify that that was correct. So for the people online, that is correct. There are only 14.
Thanks, Chris. All right, passing this over to Tim now.
We're going to give you a minute just so you can finish up the ballots before we'll proceed. So. All right. So when I reflect over the last few years, there's several items that come to my mind, but the first and foremost is really the importance of the athlete voice to the association. Having the athlete voice, is critical in the leadership roles to provide the input, feedback as decisions are being made by the board, which is very critical to our success. I can honestly say I'm proud of the strides we've made with all the individuals who stepped up, volunteered their time to help lead during, quite honestly, some of the most difficult times in the history of the NWBA. So to each of you, I do want to say thank you for taking that opportunity and time to provide that support. The other thing is the pride we have in the sport. We are the only country to return from Tokyo with 2 medals. Considering all the challenges that our athletes and our staff faced, that's a huge source of pride. So I want to thank and really point out and congratulate each of those individuals who are sitting in this room tonight or online to say thank you for representing the country and our association so well. I also want to express my gratitude to the engaged leadership, those that are sitting up here, but also many of you who are sitting on the floor or are participating online as we continue to navigate through these very extraordinary times. I'm confident with this engaged membership and our leadership that our sport will continue to grow as we exit the pandemic. I can personally say, I'm proud to be associated with the NWBA. although I may be leaving the role, I'm definitely not going to be leaving the sport. I've said to many of you, I'll always be around supporting, volunteering in some way, some fashion. The sport, I've been a part of this for 17 years. I can say I never, when I entered into the sport, imagined the impact each of you would have not only on me, but my family. I started when my kids were 1 and 3 years of age. I could tell stories about traveling to tournaments with my 1-year-old daughter and her puking in the back seat and everything else. But having the opportunity for my kids to grow up with such a great group of role models, it's something that I'll be forever grateful. So even though I may be leaving the role again, I'm always going to be around. But however, I want to say from my family to you, thank you for being such a great part of my life. And we'll continue moving forward. With that being said, Mike shared our financials just a short time ago, and even though during challenging times we maintained a very solid financial performance. And each year, as we discuss, our board assesses the environment to determine if any increase in membership dues are necessary. So we are once again very pleased that the membership dues will remain the same for the 22 and 23 season, and we wanted to be able to share that good news going into the year for planning. So with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to Will Waller.
Thanks, Tim. Before I dive in, I want to personally thank Tim for his ongoing leadership with the organization. When I moved to Cleveland in late 2008, I had the opportunity to meet Tim and become a part of the program there. Just always blown away by people who have no link to the sport, no family member with a disability, or no other reason to be involved. Not only do they get involved, but they stay involved in some form or fashion, and to take every opportunity to serve at higher levels and more complex levels, especially when there weren't a lot of people beating down the door to take the job during the stressful times that we were enduring. Just want to say on behalf of membership and the board that we really appreciate all that you've done for the organization. So as you all can see on the screen here, I wanted to put all of our board members up. We've had a variety of new leaders come on board last year, and I'd say that the quality of debate continues to improve, where we have active members who are apprised of the different issues that we're facing, and people who not only bring healthy debate to the table, but also a willingness to raise their hands and work on the issues that we're confronting. So thanks to the other board members. And I'll also say, you see a vacancy listed on there for an independent director, and we continue to seek out qualified candidates for that opportunity as well. And lastly, one of the things we've said it a bit over the course of the last several months, but something that I couldn't be more proud of is when you look at the amount of highly qualified females who are on the board of directors for the NWBA. Just think it's really great to have active voices on the board who are advocating for one of our most important divisions and growth areas, which is the women's game. So appreciate these strong female leaders being part of the board as well. But the board alone would not be able to drive the effectiveness of the organization. So another layer of leadership that is critical to the success of the organization are the various committees that you can see listed here. And many of them help us with the governance of the organization. And then several of them are highly specialized as well. So you heard Mike talk earlier about the financials of the organization and the way we've done our best to weather the storm of COVID, and the way we had to weather the storm of some of the things that were going on in 2018. Mike does that along with the audit committee and other members of the board to help set the direction from a financial perspective, but also to provide oversight for my role as well as for the organization. One of the areas I wanted to point out, Mike touched on it a bit earlier, is we want to add a couple of project teams to the organization, and that's going to be split into two bodies of work: revenue generation project team, and then a very distinct group of people that could help us with grant writing. So when you go out for sponsorships and partnerships, the skills that you need for that are not necessarily the same as the skills you need for writing good grant applications and whatnot. And really excited to have a couple of really strong board members as it relates to revenue generation. So Matt Pierre sitting a few seats over to my left. He brings great marketing capability to the table. And not present here in the room today is Stephen Curtis, who's a member of the board as well. He's going to be supporting that project team. And then Ryan Martin, who does a great job with his foundation out in Connecticut, will be taking part in that team. And then from a grants perspective, Darlene is going to be helping to lead up that work with several other individuals to help us try to get some more grant dollars to help us ultimately get money so that we can put programming in place for our current and future participants. The next subject is diversity, equity, and inclusion plan. One of the things that we're required to do through our relationship with the Usopc is to articulate what our plans are to improve in the diversity, equity, and inclusion space. So as some of you may know, the Usopc is our largest source of funding. And the vast majority of those dollars go towards high performance, where 100% of the dollars that come through the high performance grant have to be directed to our high performance teams. But over the last few years, the Usopc has also begun funding what we'll call an administrative grants or special grants. So Mike talked about our accounting partner. We get support on some legal matters. We get support to fund the role that Tina Kaufman-Kane occupies. And so in order to receive those dollars, whether it be high performance or administrative grant, we need to satisfy various expectations from the Usopc. And one of them would be the DE&I plan. So I'm not going to go over all of the details, but I will read off what a few of the objectives are. Promote the retention and recruitment of women to participate in the NWBA and sport of wheelchair basketball. Promote an inclusive environment through transgender athlete participation within the NWBA and sport of wheelchair basketball. Create a military division for active and retired military personnel to have the ability to compete in wheelchair basketball, and increase the number of women involved in leadership roles within the NWBA. So for those of you who have had an opportunity to track some of our announcements, you know that we don't have to start all of these from scratch. There's some initiatives that are already underway. But as we think about key focus areas moving forward, the military division is certainly one of those, and driving women's participation, whether that be in leadership roles or in the sport in general, are both critically important. And if anyone wants to dive deeper into some of these, I'll be available all weekend or virtually in the future if you'd like to discuss them further. And by the way, there's 2 minutes left for the voting to turn in your ballot. So if you haven't done so already, or click submit online. And I think Junior's in the back of the room. He'd be happy to collect them from you. Junior, raise your hand. Okay, great. Okay, so return to play campaign. Prior to the prior 2 years, we have raised over $250,000 in peer-to-peer campaigns. And much of that has to do with the work of the individuals who have signed up to participate in those campaigns. And for those of you who are unaware, 90% of funds that are raised by teams stay with the teams. The additional 10% goes towards the cost of our tool and the time to administer the campaigns. As we go forward into 2022, we want to focus on one campaign date and one campaign window of time, which will happen during the start of the season. And in order to determine the best time, we're going to send out a communication to teams to find out which window of time would work best for all of you. To be honest with you, as we've launched these campaigns in the past, I probably was expecting a much higher amount of participation. And I'm hoping that, if we do a better job of aligning with you proactively, that we'll have a chance to increase the participation, because historically, prior to myself being involved in various NWBA leadership roles, one of the major complaints was that the NWBA always wanted people to get involved in fundraising that only benefited the national level. Whereas now the purpose of tools like this is to provide you with resources that can help you raise funds locally and funds that will stay with you. Paralympic Sport Organization, another requirement with the USOPC. So I've shared information on this in the past, but the overall intent is that we have to be compliant with the requirements of the Ted Stevens Amateur Sports Act and USOPC bylaws. And the USOPC will conduct an audit to ensure criteria are met based on the NGB audit standards and implementation guide. And there will be a recertification every 4 years. So when Mike was talking earlier about the external audit, that had to do with our audit of our financials. The USOPC audit comes in and looks at our financials, but a variety of other areas of how we operate the business. So the timeline that you see on the screen now was the initial timeline that was provided by the USOPC. And we've gone through the majority of these steps. The only thing that's changed is when we began to get feedback in December by members of the women's national team, the USOPC put our application on pause, and they wanted to make sure that they can do an independent investigation to understand what NWBA communications have been like. So that investigation is still ongoing, and we're hoping that they can bring that to closure quickly so that we can get ourselves certified as a Paralympic sport organization with the USOPC. And that is it for the formal presentation. What we'd like to do now is open it up for questions and answers. If you have a question online, if you could go to the chat area of GoToMeeting and put your question in, we'll be sure to answer that as well. We don't have any questions in the room, and it appears we don't have any online. We're going to begin the tallying of the ballots. And if you bear with us, we'll give you the results of those shortly.
No, I don't have enough money to get there tonight. But thank you. I was like, I don't even know. Oh, what I said in junior? Yeah, no, it's good. I don't think so. About what? That I don't want to say my piece? What did I say? You can hear me online. We were just talking about this rosters. Right, but we were just talking about rosters.
Yeah, just mute it.